The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says 274 Palestinians were killed during Saturday's Israeli offensive on the Nuseirat refugee camp. The operation led to the rescue of 4 Israeli hostages taken by Hamas during the October 7th attacks. They were freed during the raid in broad daylight. Israel has previously estimated there were fewer than 100 casualties. Footage from the area's Al-Aqsa hospital shows badly wounded people lying on the ground. The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, has condemned the killings, describing them as another massacre of civilians. Well, Mustafa Barghouti is the Secretary-General and co-founder of the Palestinian National Initiative, and he spoke earlier to my colleague Maxine Croxall and gave his reaction to the latest development in Israel and Gaza.
Well, there is a great amount of anger because in the process, the Israeli army committed, as Joseph Borrell said, a horrible massacre, killing no less than 218 Palestinians, mostly children and women, bombarding whole neighborhoods for no reason, and injuring, in addition to that, 400 people, many of whom will die because Israel has already destroyed most medical facilities and hospitals in Gaza. It was a horrible act. Of course, we want all the prisoners to be released, but there was another way to do that, which is to conclude a deal.
Well,
at this rate, Netanyahu will need 20 years of massacres to release the rest of the 120 Israeli prisoners.
Well, Israel, of course, disputes that this was a massacre, and it does seem that the number of casualties is contested, but it certainly was scores. But Israel's view is, don't take hostages, then we won't need to free them, and civilians won't be at risk.
Why do Israelis take hostages? We have everybody talks about the 120 Israeli prisoners or hostages, as you call them, but nobody speaks about the 14,500 Palestinians in Israeli prisons, including 5,000 who were kidnapped in Gaza. Nobody speaks. What was remarkable is that the Israelis said that the Israeli prisoners who were released were in very good health condition and well taken care of.
Well, except we know.
On the other hand, let me finish. On the other hand, 14,500 Palestinian prisoners are subjected to torture. 52 Palestinian prisoners have been killed already in Israeli prisons since the 7th of October.
The Israeli government contests those accusations.
Well, the Israeli government was not the spokesperson of the Israeli government.
There are 116 hostages left. 40 of them are believed to have died whilst in Gaza. Everyone talks about an either-or situation, that one thing is separate from the other. All of these issues are tightly bound up. You've mentioned this deal. How likely is it that you think a ceasefire deal will really come to pass when we've got all of these different elements which could force Hamas to dig in, or could persuade the Israelis that, well, we've rescued 4, we'll try and get some more of the hostages out?
I'll tell you what Israeli leaders say, what Israeli opposition leaders say. They say that Netanyahu cared only about himself. He doesn't care about the hostages.
Who do Hamas care? Mr. Barghouti, I know you've told us that you have no link in any way with Hamas, but who do Hamas care about? They're using people, surely, as civilians, as human shields, and there will inevitably be civilian casualties in any sort of operation at all if that continues.
I would really appreciate if you allow me to answer, please, your questions. And please don't interrupt me.
Mr. Barghouti, I'm sorry. It's an opportunity here to explore some of the things that you say before you move on to make the next point. Each of your points requires and deserves some attention.
Because if you accept only the Israeli narrative, of course you will say so, but you have to see our narrative as well. And the narrative here is that this whole problem is related to the fact that Israel is occupying us since 57 years. Israel is displacing us since 76 years. That is the roots. These are the roots of the problem. And there are Palestinian prisoners. I'm not defending Hamas. I don't belong to Hamas. But I'm saying there is a better way of getting the Israeli prisoners safe which is to conclude a deal. And the deal would mean release of all Israeli prisoners and the release of Palestinian prisoners, some of whom have been in Israeli jails for 43 years. And a complete and total ceasefire. An end of this war. You know how many people the Israeli army killed up to now? 46,000, including 15,000 children. That's why Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, decided to put the Israeli army on the blacklist of those who kill children.
Along with Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. And as you would expect, Israel has rejected that label. Let me finish here. Let me finish.
Why do you keep telling me what Israel says? I am not. You don't represent Israel. I know what Israel says.
I don't represent Israel, and I don't represent the Palestinians. But I was robust with the Israeli commentator I spoke to an hour ago, which you may not have heard. This is not about whose side I believe. We're trying to interrogate both narratives. Final question to you. To what extent is all of this a failure of Palestinian politicians generally for generations to get a grip of their own situation? Surely there must be a better way to run Gaza. If Hamas are the best people have to choose from, they'll stick with Hamas. Are they really the best option for the Gaza Strip?
You know, this is an excellent question. And my answer to you is that we would have had much better leadership if we were allowed as people to practice our right of democratic elections. Who stood against our elections in 2021? Israel. Who did not support our free democratic elections? United States of America. Why don't the world allow us to elect our leaders freely and democratically, as everybody else is allowed to do, and as your people are going to do in Britain? We need democracy. We need the right to choose our leaders. And Israel and the United States has no right whatsoever to impose on us leaders or collaborators that would sustain the Israeli military occupation of Gaza, which should not continue. It has to stop. The end of occupation is the way to get to peace and democracy and prosperity for everybody.
That was Mustafa Barghouti there speaking to Martine Croxall. Let me just bring you a line of breaking news that we have. This is actually coming from the Reuters news agency, saying that the Hamas armed wing is saying that 3 Israeli hostages were killed, including a US citizen, during that Israel hostage operation that we were talking about earlier in Gaza. So that is, as I said, coming from the Reuters news agency. And in a video posted on the Hamas's Telegram channel on Sunday, it's saying that the hostages were killed as part of that Israeli military operation in which some of those hostages that we were saying, the 4 hostages, freed there. Well, Yossi Beilin is a former Israeli justice minister and peace negotiator, and he initiated the Oslo peace process and the informal Geneva peace accord. And I spoke to him a little earlier and asked him what impact that Israeli military operation will have on further negotiations to release more hostages.
Well, I believe that what happened yesterday was, of course, very important, since Hamas doesn't show any readiness for exchange of the civilian hostages, the babies, the elderly people in their hands with Palestinian prisoners. But apparently, it may have an influence on Hamas now if they understand that Israel will not just wait for the answer whether they want such an exchange or not, but if they don't answer, it will release as many hostages as it can. And it is not easy. And as you said, there were civilian casualties on the Palestinian side. But if Hamas is actually hiding the hostages in these civilian homes, it cannot complain about Israel trying to save them. The impact may be, I'm not sure, but I hope, accelerate the willingness of the parties to negotiate about a deal. In this deal, all the hostages should be released, and the Palestinian prisoners would release in exchange a much bigger much higher number than the Israeli hostages.
Oh.
But the main question for me, the main question is whether we are going now to something like the President Biden plan, which was offered already more than a week ago to both sides, or are we actually playing games with each other, not to be the ones who are rejecting it wholeheartedly, but not accepting it and whatever. And if Hamas is planning to remain in Gaza, which I believe is bad news for the free world.
We heard that the Hamas-run health ministry has said that 274 Palestinians were killed in that raid, four hostages released, as we know. Does that seem proportionate action to you?
It is not a question of proportion. Israel has all the right in the world, in my view, to release these innocent people, these innocent babies and elderlies who are in the hands of Hamas. Now, it may cost a price, and I'm very sad, really, it is not just a lip service. I'm very sad to see people who are becoming on the Palestinian side the victims of such a act. But they should address Hamas and know that if Hamas is hiding our people in these neighborhoods, Israel will not say, oh, since you did such a very clever thing and hid them in those neighborhoods, we will not try to release our people. We should, as long as Hamas is not releasing them, it is our role, not only our right, to release as many Israelis as possible.
Yossi Berlin speaking to me there.